Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 4, Episode 7, Little Green Men. This episode first aired November 13th, 1995. Before we talk about this one, anything to say about the previous episode? Starship Down?
No, it was perfect. Although they would have all been crushed when there was a hull breach.
I still don't feel great about that decision to go into the dangerous atmosphere. I mean, it caused the death of at least 3 crew members, but we acted like everything was fine at the end. It was weird.
Yeah, there was a lot of red shirting in that episode.
Yeah. But weirdly, we still liked it.
Yeah, there was some good aspects.
Yeah.
It borrowed heavily from other movies or shows.
Right.
It felt very familiar.
Yes, that's probably true. Okay, so we should move to this one?
Yes. But before we start, this is one of those episodes that, for some bizarre reason, I pretty much remembered it exactly. I don't know why this one, of all episodes, just stuck with me.
Well, it's a little quirky. Maybe
Yeah.
the weird ones stick with you.
Maybe that's true.
Well, then let's get started.
Okay.
In the cold open, Rom is peddling Nog's belongings in the bar because when a young Ferengi goes out on his own, he traditionally raises capital by selling his boyhood treasures. And Nog is leaving soon for Starfleet Academy. So this looks like my worst nightmare, a flea market.
That is so true, listeners. You wouldn't believe it.
You know it's true. Everyone is digging through Nog's junk, and Miles is surprised to see Worf there, but Worf is just there because Cisco made him come. I thought that was cute.
Yeah.
Worf isn't so sure a Ferengi belongs at the Academy, but Miles points out that the same was probably said about Worf not that long ago. It's a great point. Dax buys Bashir a holosuite program, which honestly seemed a little pricey. Kira is eyeing a spring ball racket and recognizes that it's actually her racket that someone must have taken from her quarters. And in typical Ferengi fashion, Nog lies about it, and then, when that lie doesn't work, he tells a different lie. I mean, Worf might be right.
Well, I think there might be a lot of cultural challenges for Nog attending the academy.
When a lie is your first reaction, you're not going to make a lot of friends.
Yeah. And I didn't think he stole it. I think that she probably left it somewhere or left it within arm's reach of Nog.
Oh, okay. Sure.
And from a Ferengi point of view, picking something up that somebody had put down and looked away for a moment was not stealing, because you clearly didn't want it if you weren't keeping your eye on it.
Yeah, finders keepers, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you think about it, the Ferengi really are sort of like toddlers. I mean, that's a childish way to look at something, and this would make perfect sense for them.
Oh, nice.
Worf finds a Ferengi tooth sharpener, and he tests it out on his own tooth, which is gross and seems very unhygienic, but he's thrilled and has found something to buy.
This is why Dawn is so good in that role. The whole body language and the eyes when he sees this thing, and you see him sort of light up and wants to buy it. He's learned how to emote under all that prosthetics.
Yeah, well, he's had a lot of practice.
Yeah.
Quark comes in, making the usual disparaging remarks about Nog going to Starfleet Academy.
Yes.
He tells Rom that the ship Cousin Gala owed him has finally arrived. Apparently, Quark loaned him money to start up a munitions consortium 10 years ago, and Gala is finally paying him back. Quark assumes it's defective, and he wants Rom to inspect it.
I like that. I also like Rom buying Nog's pajamas. I thought that was a cute touch, although, based on what Jake's worn in previous episodes, I would have thought Jake would have been bidding on the pajamas.
Well, it wouldn't fit him. He could only get one of Nog's shirts over one of his arms, I would think.
You've got Garrick right there. He could let it out.
You can't make something bigger when you let it out. That's not how that works. You can't add to its mass. Now we go to Quark's new ship, and inside it's pretty fancy. Rom is shocked to find that there's nothing wrong with it. He says it'll outrun a Romulan interceptor. Quark wants to take it for a test drive, so they decide to do a road trip and drop Nog off at Starfleet Academy on Earth. When Rom runs out to tell Nog this, Quark says to himself that he's sure the trip will be very profitable. And we cue the theme song.
Yes, because he's going to load it with contraband. He actually says it right out in the open.
Well, to himself, yes.
Well, possibly to himself.
Right. Yeah, well, Odo's not on there yet. Because he's in the next scene. Back in the bar, Quark is giving instructions to Morn about running the bar in his absence. Odo thinks Morn is a good choice, though he might drink up all the profits. But Quark knows that the Ferengi waiters would rob him blind. Odo says it's awfully generous of Quark to take Nog to Earth, and Quark says he's a generous person, and Odo is like, sure you are. Next, Jake and Nog are hanging out in their favorite spot on the upper floor of the promenade, trying to say goodbye to their childhood. Miles and Julian arrive with a present for Nog, a sort of electronic guidebook for Earth. It's an interactive program detailing Earth customs, culture, history, and geography. He thanks them and shakes their hands. Julian says, make us proud. It's a bit like when your uncle gives you $5 as you're going off to college. That's what this scene reminded me of.
I was surprised, given how really motivated Nog was to change his life and get into Starfleet, that he hadn't already studied human history and Earth customs and culture and things. I would have thought he would have read up on all that by now.
Well, they imply later that he's always been interested in it and that he does have some knowledge of it. I guess maybe this is just adding to knowledge that he already has, or maybe this is more specific, like maybe he's just got cultural knowledge, like really general stuff.
Yeah, he's just like read the encyclopedia page on it.
Right. Nog takes one last wistful look at the spot he and Jake used to sit in before Jake walks him to the airlock.
That was a really cute scene. It really was, like you said, it was sort of a growing up scene of I'm leaving childish things behind.
I don't remember doing anything like that as a kid, even as we moved to a new town or whatever. I don't remember standing at old things and going, oh, I'll never see this again. But it's something that fits on TV.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think I was too wrapped up in what I was doing at the moment to wistfully look at my childhood and go, bye.
Exactly.
I think you're onto something with the TV. I think it's something that people look back on in older life.
Yeah, I could see going back now and looking at the places that I hung out at as a kid.
Yeah.
Now we go to Quark's ship, and Nog is reading about human history to Quark and Rom. While Quark calls humans primitive, Nog says they went from being savages with a simple barter system to leaders of a vast interstellar federation in only 5,000 years, while it took the Ferengi twice as long. And the Ferengi had to buy their warp technology.
I'm glad we've got to this part, because ages ago you made a comment about how do the Ferengi ever advance? And I so wanted to give you a spoiler in saying, well, they don't. They buy technology to advance.
Yeah, and Quark kind of interrupts him here, and he's like, who cares? Speed of technical advancement is not as important as short-term quarterly gains.
So Quark actually has an MBA.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
As they fly along, Rom casually mentions that he knows that Quark is smuggling chemosite in the cargo hold, a dangerous and highly profitable substance, especially on Orion. Rom figured this out when he engaged impulse engines and noticed that the weight was a little off. When Quark went to waste extraction, which I assume is the bathroom, although extraction is a little graphic, Rom snuck into the cargo hold and looked around.
Now, I wonder what the Orions use it for.
Well, we don't cover that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm missing out here.
Rom says he'll forget what he saw for 20% of the profits. Nog chimes in for another 10%, and Quark agrees and tells Rom to go faster. Then Nog asks Rom if he's ever heard of the Bell Riots, and he shows him a picture in his guidebook. He's like, doesn't this guy look a lot like Captain Sisko? Yes, it does.
I feel bad for the original Gabriel Bell. His face is now lost to history.
Erased.
Yeah.
Quark brushes it off, saying all humans look alike. As they approach Earth's star system, Rom is unable to get the ship out of warp. He thinks the command sequencer was designed to fail, and Cousin Gala sabotaged it. And Nog says, well, Gala never really did like Quark anyway. I mean, was he not suspicious at all that he was given a brand new fancy ship with nothing wrong with it? I don't know. It seems a little weak.
Well, again, I think it's because Quark can be so ridiculously gullible at times. I think this is a trait of the Ferengi that, despite all their bluster, the number of actual Ferengi who are really good at business is pretty low.
I think about this in terms of people who I work with, not saying anybody today, but people who I have worked with, who their egos are so big, right, and so out of control that they just think that they're always going to be right. Like nothing bad could ever happen to them, because they're clearly the smartest person in the room. And then something like this happens and they're so not the smartest person in the room. But if they had just taken a moment to think, maybe I need to learn something, or maybe I need to be a little bit humble or whatever, the whole thing could have just turned in a completely different direction. But we don't do that because that might damage my ego. That's what this reminded me of.
That's a good take on the Ferengi. I think there is a lot of that, of they're almost like the eternal salespeople of, I'm always the smartest one in the room.
Yeah. That complete lack of humility is also mixed in with that immediate response of a lie.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like,
yes.
Even instead of saying, oh, I'm sorry, or, oh, I should have done better, or whatever, you just go, oh, that didn't happen. I didn't do it. Somebody else did it.
It must have got mixed up in the lost and found.
Yeah, it's all mixed together, I think. It's an ego and humility problem. Or a lack thereof. Well, anyway, if the ship keeps accelerating, it will tear itself apart. Emergency overrides are frozen. Rom has an idea to vent plasma from the warp core into the cargo hold, causing the chemosite to react in a way that would allow him to create an inversion wave in the warp field. That's a lot of science.
Oh, yeah.
And then he says they can make an emergency landing on Earth. Quark is like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but you're a genius. The ship increases in speed and starts bouncing, and from the outside, they show it kind of disappear.
This is an important moment, I think, because this is where the writers have decided that Rom is actually smart. There's been hints of it, and this is the first time we really see Rom not only is good with the little things, but actually understands warp theory. There's a great moment where Quark says to him, I'm paraphrasing here, when did you get so smart? And Rom replies with, I've always been smart, I've just lacked self-confidence.
Well, we get a couple of clues about Rom's intelligence before this.
Yeah.
There was that episode Necessary Evil where he was able to break into all those locks, right?
Yeah.
And get into Quark's safe and whatever. And there's that other episode where he's breaking into his storeroom.
Yeah.
And then there's the time where Nog is talking about why he wants to go to Starfleet Academy, and he talks about his father being a genius at stuff like this. So we get these hints, but we haven't seen it before.
He could have been an engineer on a Starfleet vessel.
Right. Although Quark makes a good point later that he could have seen this problem first, too. So maybe he's not a complete genius. Well, then Quark awakes with a gasp, and he finds himself in a room under a sheet. When he sits up, a guy on the other side of a one-way mirror in an old-time U.S. Army uniform picks up an old-time rotary phone and says, tell General Denning one of the Martians is awake. By the way, he didn't dial that phone. He was way too busy dramatically lighting his cigarette.
Yes.
And the calendar on the wall says it's July 1947.
Boom.
Now we see a bunch of people, all smoking, watching the Ferengi through the glass. General Denning asks if they took care of the idiot in Roswell who told the press that we captured a flying saucer.
Yes.
The soldier says he retracted the story when we told him it was a weather balloon.
Nice touch.
General Denning, by the way, is played by Charles Napier. This guy has been in absolutely everything.
Oh,
from
yeah.
Mannix and the original series of Star Trek to Party of Five to Archer. He was also on the TV show Roswell, which was a fun nugget for this episode.
Oh, yeah. It's the underlying gag within this episode.
Yeah. Anyway, the general doesn't want to risk a public panic. He wants to know more about what the aliens want before they tell anybody anything.
Do they keep on calling them Martians at this point?
Yeah, they keep saying they're Martians. And then they turn on the audio from the room and we hear Quark and Rom talking in Ferengi, so nobody understands them. Quark stomps over to the door and is confused by the doorknob. They're wondering where they are and how they got there. The last thing they remember was going in for a crash landing. When Quark suddenly panics about the state of his ship, he starts pounding on the door. The soldiers draw their guns, and we see that there's a German shepherd in the room with the soldiers at this point. I actually didn't see that the first time, but I saw it the second time. The woman in the room, who is a nurse but dressed in a military uniform, tells the guy in the suit to not let them hurt the aliens. She says they're just scared.
Now, does she have impressive hair or what?
She has a lot of hair, that's for sure. So this guy in the suit, and not a military uniform, turns out he's a professor. The president wants the professor to try and talk to the Martians. We also learned that this guy in the suit is engaged to the woman. I'm not sure why this detail mattered in the story, but they brought it up like 27 times.
And I don't think they could smoke anymore if they tried.
Oh my God, everybody is smoking. It's crazy. Quark is ranting about how coming to Earth was a terrible idea, and it's all Rom's fault because he said the ship was safe. Rom says maybe they're dead, and this is the divine treasury. But Quark doesn't think so. So then Rom says, oh, maybe they're in the other place, the vault of eternal destitution.
Even their religious faith is based on acquisition and money.
I mean, it would have to, right?
Yeah.
It's almost required. So in the room now, the professor welcomes them to Earth and says they mean them no harm, but the universal translators are malfunctioning. The Ferengi start hitting their own heads to see if they can get the translators working. But the humans think maybe it's some kind of greeting, and so they start hitting their heads too. Nog recognizes the uniforms the humans are wearing as being from 400 years ago, and they finally figure out that they time traveled.
So Nog does have some understanding or some background of Earth history.
Yes, although he does think they're in Australia. Quark realizes they're just mimicking them and decide that they're all idiots. Nog says they aren't just stupid, they were violent, petty, bigoted, and selfish. Quark figures he can find a way to profit from millions of primitive humans. I mean, really, these are Quark's kind of people, so it makes sense that he'd be thrilled here. And we play a very quirky song into the ad break at this point.
Right. They're definitely trying to play up the humor here.
And it's like they played that music to tell me that it was a comedy.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I needed that. I mean, you could tell by every single other thing that's happened, including just all the smoking.
Right.
Well, when we come back from the ad, Nurse Garland is taking Quark's blood pressure, which is 250 over 167, quite high. Rom is looking into Nog's ear to try and fix his universal translator, and the professor thinks it's some kind of grooming ritual. Rom says there might be interference from something that's disrupting the translators. He suggests some things that might do that, including beta radiation, which is produced by nuclear fission. Quark says nobody has that within planetary atmospheres, but Nog says, oh yeah, they have atom bombs here. Quark is shocked the humans irradiated their own planet.
Which is kind of funny coming from the Ferengi, who, if they are profit-obsessed, then things like environmental concerns would be pretty low down the list, especially if they could make money.
That makes a good point. They wouldn't care about environmental concerns, but I could also see that the Ferengi would be terribly afraid of everything, so they might avoid this.
That's true. They are quite cowardly, yeah.
And I guess unless they could really get rich off it. So yeah, you're probably right. But when Rom sees the woman messing with a hairpin, he points at it. The woman says to the professor, you'd better tell him I'm your girl. I had to write that down because it was so stupid. The writers of this show would have been much more comfortable in the 40s, I think, than in the 90s. Anyway, eventually she gives him the hairpin and he uses it to reset the translator. The professor lights 2 more cigarettes as the woman says maybe they can learn something from the aliens and have their own rocket ships, and then they could start exploring for new worlds and new civilizations.
Was this a Lucky Strike commercial disguised as a Star Trek episode?
I'm not sure. The professor says something stupid in response to that about how she's going to look great in her wedding dress. She's thinking about space travel and he's like, gosh, you're pretty. So stupid. Quark does not appreciate the cigarette smell. Nog tells him it's tobacco, a deadly but addictive drug that destroys internal organs. Quark is shocked that they'd spend money on such a thing. He says, I think I'm going to like it here.
Which is also funny because the Ferengi love the Beatles stuff.
Not so fun for the Beatles.
Oh, good one.
A very memorable line from that episode.
Oh, yeah.
Nog points out that Quark can't do anything to change the timeline because he could ruin everything.
At least Nog is the responsible one here.
Well, he's joining Starfleet, so I guess that's what you would want. Outside, the soldier is describing the interior of Quark's ship and showing some pictures to the general. The big German shepherd walks into the scene again, and the professor pets him while saying he expected advanced alien races to communicate telepathically. He says, we need some experts to help understand their language, but the soldier says we aren't bringing in any other people. Then Nurse Garland tells everyone to come quickly, and back inside we go to find that the translators are working. Quark introduces himself as Chief Financial Officer from the Ferengi Alliance and says he's come with a business proposition. The general chomps down on his stereotypical cigar. So Quark says he's been sent by his people to open a market and sell advanced technology. Technology that would let them travel through space or transport to other locations or cure their deadliest diseases. Of course, the general asks about weapons. Quark says he's the man for weapons. He can teach them about phasers, disruptors, photon, or quantum torpedoes. The general asks what he wants in return, and they settle on gold. Quark says we'll be advancing your culture overnight, so a couple million bars of gold would be a good place to start. The general says Quark reminds him of his car salesman brother-in-law, and he doesn't trust him. I totally relate to that.
Yep.
Quark shrugs. He's like, I don't care. They'll just make a deal with someone else then, which makes the general suspicious that Quark is going to sell weapons to the Russians. The general says he needs authorization from the president. When the guy blows smoke into Quark's face, Quark offers up some advice. He says, stop poisoning yourselves with tobacco and atom bombs. This gets the general's attention. He's like, wait, what do you know about atom bombs? Quark tries to pretend like he knows all about Earth because he knows about baseball, root beer, darts, and atom bombs. This reminded me of your relatives understanding America because they'd been to Florida and San Francisco and nowhere in between.
And most importantly, Disney World, so they understand everything about America. I'm honestly surprised that the general didn't completely jump on this one, because basically in exchange for gold, they would get technology that is centuries ahead of where they are. I would think if an alien turned up, the general would be like, yeah, okay, we're making this deal. You want 2 million bars of gold for it? Hold on, I'll get on the phone.
But he made the point of saying that he reminded him of his car salesman brother, which probably means he doesn't really think that Quark has the ability to do that.
Okay.
Or that maybe he's lying, or maybe he's going to sell it to a bunch of different people. So I don't think he's ignoring the importance of being able to advance technology. I think he's just like, I don't know about this guy.
Right. Okay, I get that. That he basically looks at it as a trust issue and is like, yeah, this is a con man. This isn't a guy who's going to sell me the actual technology.
Exactly.
So his personal biases are affecting the fact that he could literally have technology of his dreams.
Well, he hasn't really seen anything either, except for the spaceship, but he hasn't seen anything else. Like, they don't know how anything on that ship works.
You could look at it as perhaps he thinks that maybe they stole the spaceship and they actually have no understanding of it.
It's possible.
That's a good point.
I would believe it with these guys.
Well, yeah.
Well, now it's dark outside, and just the professor and the nurse are talking to Rom and Nog. The big dog is also hanging out randomly in the room again. They tell the professor that the law on their planet is that women aren't allowed to wear clothes. It's like, oh my God, do not get me started on this again. And we also have some nonsense with Nog asking the nurse to massage his ears because it's fun to trick women into, I mean, do I have to say it? I'm not
you mean
say it, but you know what I'm thinking.
You mean Nog got a from the nurse?
You can't say that on the podcast. Quark comes in from a meeting with the general. He complains about the female being too cheerful and also that they left this barking dog in the room with them. But then the dog jumps up on Quark and he morphs into Odo.
Boom.
I did not see that coming.
Yes, that was absolutely great. I remember watching this originally and just sort of going, oh, nice.
I mean, it's never a surprise in season 1 or 2 when Odo appears. This one totally surprised me. I was too busy thinking, what is with this random dog? It doesn't make any sense. If it had been like a random cart, I would have been, that's Odo. But the dog totally threw me.
Oh, and it's great because you see the dog appearing all over the place up until this point.
Yeah.
So you're just like, oh, there's this dog hanging around. I assume it was a security dog or something like that.
Or they thought it was.
Yeah, it was very nicely done.
Well, Odo is there to arrest Quark for smuggling chemosite. He says the ship is in a hangar on the other side of the base, and the engines appear to be intact. Rom thinks if there's enough chemosite left, and if they can find a big enough power source, they might be able to recreate the time warp that brought them there. The reverse time travel stuff in these stories is always a little hand-wavy.
Oh, yeah. You just fly backwards.
No problem.
It'll...
Yeah, no problem.
You'll end up in the right time.
Yeah, everything will be fine.
Oh, you could just wait for Mars and Kira to find you.
That's probably not going to happen here. But Quark says they're not leaving. We're staying here, and inside of a year, we'll be running the whole planet. These humans are crude, gullible, and greedy. These are humans I can understand and manipulate.
Quark's kind of people.
Absolutely. Nog reminds him they can't mess with the timeline. Quark doesn't care about the timeline. He even intends to sell their ship to the Ferengi and give them warp technology centuries before the humans, Klingons, or even the Vulcans. Odo is amused by his vivid imagination. He says the ship will be ready in 6 hours and you're going to be on it. Quark disagrees, but Odo turns back into the dog.
When he says it'll be ready in 6 hours, does he mean that's how long it will take for the power cells to recharge? Or is Odo going back to the ship and repairing it?
I got the impression Odo was doing something to prep it. Yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
Outside, the general says that little piano-playing Democrat isn't as dumb as he looks. I guess he's talking about President Truman?
Yeah.
He doesn't want to make a deal with the Martians until they know more about them. The soldier says he'll find out what they're up to. Back in the lab, Quark says the opportunity for profit is too high to leave, but Rom thinks it's too risky. And in come the soldiers who put bags over their heads. And then we move to a different, darker room, and they're trying to interrogate Quark about the Russians. The nurse gives him 5 injections of sodium pentothal, with Quark screaming bloody murder every time. I mean, it's just a needle for crying out loud.
Yeah, but the Ferengi are such big cowards.
I know, but it doesn't matter because it's having no impact on him anyway. The nurse complains that what they're doing is wrong, but the soldier calls them invaders from another world, and he makes a threat to cut Quark open. Rom and Nog now magically have their hoods off. I don't know. This part makes no sense to me. Like, why are they all in the same room? What was the point of the hoods? Oh, it's very silly. But Rom spills the entire story of what really happened, of course, just right away. It doesn't take anything to threaten him. Nog makes up a whole thing about them being advanced scouts for the Ferengi invasion fleet. He says, we've been studying you for centuries, and you're ripe for conquest. And Quark is like, what? He says, we're helpless and harmless. We just want to sell you things.
This was a great contrast between the three of them.
Yeah, yes.
Nog is the one who's thinking on his feet and trying to intimidate them, basically give an impression that they're stronger than they are. Rom is just telling the truth. He just immediately goes into panic mode and is like, I'll tell you everything. See House of Quark for an example of that. And it ends up sounding so ridiculous, nobody believes him anyway. And Quark is trying to play the, but we're harmless, don't hurt us card.
Yeah. But I don't really think Nog had much of a plan.
I don't think they're great planners.
No.
But I think Nog, maybe having a little bit better understanding of the culture at the time, is probably making the better play to try and intimidate them through, oh, we're this powerful empire, let us go, or else.
Well, maybe because they do actually untie him so that he can show where the invasion is going to happen on a map.
Yeah.
But he tries to punch the soldier, and then the professor and the nurse overpower the guards, which seems highly unlikely in this tiny room. But then they come up with a story that the aliens used mind control to get them to help.
That's actually a smart idea.
Yeah. And they all run outside together, but the general has them at gunpoint immediately. But Odo appears behind them and knocks out the armed guys. The professor says, who's that? And Quark says, oh, my hero. Really funny.
They were really springing for the morphing budget on this episode.
Oh, yeah, there was a lot of it. They jump in a Jeep and head to the hangar. The nurse tells them an atom bomb will be detonated in 7 minutes, and they figure that's the power source that they can use.
It's funny how a military base at the time looks remarkably like the backlots of a studio.
Yes, and every movie I think that I've ever seen something like this in, this is what it looked like, because they were all in the same backlot. Yes. So it makes perfect sense. They thank the humans for their help, but the nurse says, you don't need to thank us. I just hope that one day mankind will travel to the stars and take its place in a vast alliance of planets. Federation of planets, Rom says. Quark is like, you're better off just staying on Earth. The galaxy's a dangerous place.
I like that.
The Ferengi and Odo run to the ship, and the professor and the nurse get back in the Jeep and have a weird, awkwardly long kiss. I could not follow why that was so long. We see the Ferengi ship fly off over their heads. Back with the soldiers, they're wondering what to do as they see the ship escape, and the general says, well, all we found was a crashed weather balloon.
I'm pretty sure that general is very good at covering his own butt.
Yeah, he's good at his job. They fly into the mushroom cloud, and then off they go, emerging in what looks to be the present, or the future. Earth Orbital Control hails them, and we seem to have succeeded. Quark says humans are still a bunch of savages. Maybe, Nog says, but I like them. Back on the station, Quark is lamenting losing his ship and not getting to rule the galaxy. I guess they had to salvage it for passage home, which seems extreme.
Yeah. On Deep Space Nine, they do repairs on ships, seemingly without any real charge. Or do they charge? I don't know.
I don't think so. It just seemed strange that he would have to sell the entire ship. I mean, maybe it was damaged and they just didn't cover that. But it just seemed strange.
Yeah, maybe the second jump through time really just destroyed the ship.
And I also think about that time where they traveled into the Gamma Quadrant.
Yeah.
And Quark just wanted off the ship. He didn't want to go the rest of the way on the dangerous mission. And he's like, just leave me here. I'll get myself home. He didn't seem worried about it then. And he didn't have to obviously sell a ship because he didn't have one. And somehow he got back to the station. So why from Earth was there no way for him to get back to the station without selling his ship?
Especially when money doesn't mean anything on Earth. Surely he could have got the Federation to take him back.
Yeah.
Or perhaps it's one of those things of because Deep Space Nine is so far out of the way, it's a difficult trip that you end up having to pay somebody to take you there.
Maybe. I feel like they just could have thought about this a little bit more and just said the ship was damaged or something.
It was so badly damaged, not even Rom could fix it.
Yeah. Well, Odo now arrests Quark for smuggling. And this is the first time he's actually been arrested, so it's good to see. Rom says he'll contact cousin Gala to get him a lawyer. And Quark is like, you idiot! Rom shouts, see you in a few weeks, brother. I guess the punishment for smuggling is a few weeks. I don't know.
Well, there wouldn't be any evidence because they would have used up all the chemocytes. So this might just be Odo hassling Quark by going through the motions, keeping him out of the bar for a few weeks until an arbiter says, you can let him go now.
Yeah. Well, I forgot one important thing. That was the end of the episode.
Oh, really?
The end. So what do you have for overanalysis?
Well, first off, and this is probably going to make you laugh, I never realized before until this rewatching, and you might say it's a, well, duh moment, that the style of this episode is from one of those cheesy 1950s sci-fi movies. And
Definitely.
The whole feel and structure and the way the people are behaving and even the way they're talking and acting is following that genre. The ones that come to mind are like The Thing from Another Planet and This Island Earth, where they're sort of very overly dramatic, although those are actually good examples of the genre. This is very much that style. And also, thrown in there for the mix, the Three Stooges.
Yeah, that's true. They are kind of like the Three Stooges. No, that's totally what it is. It's an old-time sci-fi, yeah.
So I think that was the purpose of the way the characters behaved.
Yeah, okay. Little over the top, I guess.
Oh, exactly. And the way the three of them were behaving, like the bashing their heads and poking the pin in the ear, that was Three Stooges.
I mean, it could have been a lot grittier, I suppose, with all of these characters put together instead of sort of goofy. But there was just something that they were trying all the time to make the Ferengi so funny. And it's like, I don't know. It's not for me.
Yeah, I'll point back to, and I mentioned this before, of Ira Barr saying about the attempt at making the Ferengi funny basically failed. And this was the closest they got to what they were aiming for.
Yeah.
It's not really that funny, but there are some elements of humor in it.
Oh, definitely.
It's kind of ham-fisted. It's very hammy.
It's very hammy, yes, on all sides.
Next point. So let's address the dog in the room.
Yeah.
Odo can't do very good humanoids. And remember, ears are very hard for him to do.
But he did a perfect dog.
What on earth is happening here? That German Shepherd, or as you would call it in the UK, an Alsatian, was perfect. It looked like a dog. It even had hair. I don't get it. If you can't do good humans who have significantly less hair, and you can do bald if you really want to, he does a dog perfectly.
This is a very good point. I would say at this point, even if he could do a better human, this is the way Odo looks. And so he has established that that's his look, and that's maybe just the way he's going to do it all the time, even if now he could do better ears. But he's made a point, even not that long ago, saying that the founders are better shapeshifters than he is.
Right.
But yeah. And again, which is why maybe the cart was believable or something that you would notice, or a painting or a chair. But the dog is pretty complex. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, and if you'd done a cart or something like that, you could have had a running joke of it being in the way all the time.
Yeah.
And people like moving it out the way, like a
yes.
trolley kind of thing.
Why is this thing here?
You could add additional humor to it. But the dog.
No, that's a really good point I hadn't thought of.
Yeah. So the next point, I think in this episode as well, one of the serious things you see is Nog kind of struggling with the cultural norms of the Ferengi, where he wants to get ear rubs and wanting to do the right thing, of him being worried about it affecting the timeline. I can only imagine in the headcanon outside of this, the cultural struggle of Nog wanting to be better, but having so much of this negative programming, if you like, built in because of his father and Quark.
Yeah, I'm sure he has a lot of internal conflicts as he tries to figure out how to succeed in Starfleet Academy.
Yeah.
Like he's got to learn that females aren't going to chew his food and some of that goofy stuff. But he's also got to recognize that profit isn't going to be important to anybody else that he's in class with.
Yeah.
And, whatever these things are that he was completely raised on and has been sort of forced to believe in are just going to be so outside of the norm for everyone else that his initial reactions, it's kind of like what I said earlier, where he's going to struggle to make friends if he keeps doing that thing where every time you just start to explain something, it starts with a lie. You can't ever say, oh, I screwed up. That's just going to be really difficult for him. But it makes for a very interesting struggle to watch because he clearly wants to change. He's got to find somebody who's going to be a good mentor to him, like I think Sisko was, not Jake, but Captain Sisko. Who's going to do that for him now that he's at the academy and off the station?
Yeah, that could be a whole interesting storyline. I bet there are books on this. I have not looked.
Yeah, we We never look up the book, so.
No.
And we probably should. I've read like 2, and I enjoyed them. I read the Una McCormick book before Picard, and then I read one called Imzadi like 30 years ago, and I like both those.
And the other thing that he'll probably run into in Starfleet is the Ryans, who are far better business people than the Ferengi could ever hope to be.
And ruthless.
Oh, yeah. And brave.
Yeah.
Shout out to Tendi on Lower Decks. Many of her people have not been pirates for several years.
That's right.
Next thing, and I touched on this already, the change in Rom. I think this is really where the writers go straight to actual proof Rom is smart.
Yep. Agreed.
And I think you see Rom getting his self-confidence.
Yeah.
And I point that back to where he finally confronts his brother about him sabotaging Nog trying to get into Starfleet.
Right. Rom was sort of a pointless character in the beginning. So I guess maybe they figured out a future for him. And so now they have to bring him a little bit more down to earth, make him a little bit more of a complete character, which great. I'm all in favor of that because he was a nothing burger in the beginning.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And even Odo thought he was an idiot.
Yeah, well, Quark just called him an idiot in the episode we just watched. Starship Down, he called him an idiot in that episode.
Quark is not the most on-point judge of character or intelligence.
No, that's true. Yeah, and he was saying that too as one of his lies, so...
And on to my final point,
Okay.
another more serious point. I think we see the stagnant nature of the Ferengi Alliance fully on display here.
Meaning?
We learn that the Ferengi really just buy technological advancement, that they're so obsessed with profit and short-term gains, they're not interested in advancing their race. They're very closed-minded. And the pettiness, even in business, Galen owed Quark this ship. And he sabotages it rather than just doing good business and saying, I owe you this, here it is, quit bothering me. Every time we have a family gathering, don't bring up the fact that you loan me the money and owe me a ship.
Well, I think we've talked about this before, that they would struggle to advance, even just in the way that they keep their women held back and they don't allow them, just into normal society. And I believe that was one of the things that prompted me to say, how did they even get space travel with these sort of backward ways of looking at things? And so now we learn that they bought their way into it.
And I so wanted to tell you that when you brought that up.
But I think that aligns with what you're saying. How could they possibly advance?
And I think now that the Ferengi have alienated every other race in the Alpha Quadrant, and they need to expand, and they obviously can't, that their race is ultimately doomed. Nobody wants to do business with them. Nobody trusts them. Where do they go from here?
Well, what they could do is they could take advantage of what Rom learned about using chemosite to time travel, and they could go back to Earth and do the thing that Quark was going to do, and they could completely change history.
That is why time travel episodes are such a problem.
Yeah, exactly. It was so easy. He just went like, couple switches, boom, they're in the past. And they could do that same thing and completely change the outcome. But the reason they won't is not because the story won't let them, but that's part of it too. But the reason they won't do it is because of that selfish nature. And it's not about advancing the Ferengi. It's about, how can I get rich?
That's a good point. I guess the Ferengi, from a story standpoint, are the ultimate money corrupts.
That is true.
And with that wraps up my overanalysis.
Okay. I think the only thing I had in my overanalysis was flying into a nuclear explosion was somehow a power source. That seemed suspicious.
I believe the spaceship is MacGuffin powered.
Yeah. And of course, I still always wonder every time we time travel in one direction, how we get back so easily to the to the place where we started. I mean, come on.
The story demands it.
But that's fine. That's okay. I won't hold it against this episode because that's just such a Star Trek
At least in past tense, Miles and Kira had to expend some effort in trying to find Bashir and Sisko.
Right. Yeah, not here.
And they also had a limited supply of the, what were they, chronotons?
Yeah, they only had 3 or 4 jumps or whatever it was. Well, so I'm going to go to women in the future. And, this was women in the past being written by men in a different past, but set in a show that was in the future. I mean, everyone is a stereotype, so it's hard to complain too much because, like you said, it was sort of a pulpy kind of movie throwback. Right. But the thing I'm going to complain about, and I'm sure you already know that this is coming, was how Nog was tricking the woman into giving him a certain kind of pleasure that was supposed to be haha funny. Guess what? It's not funny. It's especially not funny to me in Star Trek. It just doesn't belong. And every time they do it, I just want to strangle somebody for being so rude to women and just thinking that it's okay behavior, because it isn't. So yuck to that is my assessment. So let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
I'm going neutral. It wasn't a terrible episode, but it also really wasn't very good. There was nothing I thought really special about this. It was trying to be a funny episode, and it really wasn't that funny. I mean, it's only a neutral. It's close to a thumbs down.
Yeah. I mean, I really felt like a lot of this episode was just kind of stupid.
Yeah.
There was some stuff that was funny, and I laughed a few times. I liked the idea that the Ferengi were the Roswell aliens.
Yeah.
I mean, that actually is quite funny.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really good idea, and it's almost like that's the only thing that I liked about it, was the idea of it. I just didn't like the execution of it.
Yeah.
And I kind of went back and forth between neutral and thumbs down. And I will admit that I'm impacted by the fact that this episode is one of the ones that I saw coming into this season as one that I've heard people talk about.
Right.
And I was like, oh, this is going to be a good one. And then I kind of hated it. And I mean, I don't want to hate anything, and I don't want to give thumbs down to any of these episodes, but I have to be true to myself, and I'm just going to give it a thumbs down. I didn't like it.
What I find funny about that is how people hold this episode up so high.
Yeah.
And
very high ratings on IMDb.
And I know, and to
Shockingly.
me, it's always been a kind of episode. If anything, my view of this episode improved because I saw they were trying to spoof the throwback to the 1950s movie. And I honestly don't ever recall thinking that before. The downside is it doesn't matter because I feel they really didn't get it to work. Also, the Three Stooges aspect. And I'm sorry, I never really liked the Three Stooges.
I didn't either.
And it ended up just seeming sort of cheesy.
Agreed.
It still amazes me, surprises me that this has such a high rating.
Yeah.
And I don't have an answer as to why.
No, I don't know either. I saw the rating and I was so shocked. I mean, I saw the rating after I watched it and after I had written my notes. And because I went into IMDb to get the date that it aired. And I saw that rating and I was like, what did I miss? Because that is... Ugh.
Yeah.
And this one was ranked higher than the one Rejoined. I wanted to call it reassociation because that was the word that they used in the episode, but it was called Rejoined. This one is ranked higher than that. I mean, come on, people. Okay, let's move on.
I don't know. Maybe I should go thumbs down. I mean, it did kind of suck.
You can change your rating.
No, I'll stick with my neutral.
All right. That brings us to the end of season 4, episode 7. Come back next week for episode 8. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, please email us at rebingeit@gmail.com or tweet us at rebingeit. Also, check us out on talkthroughmedia.com. You can leave feedback there as well, but most importantly, you can find our new podcast, Star Trek Prodigy, a Rebingeit podcast, where we are recapping and reviewing the new animated series each week. You can find this podcast on talkthroughmedia.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.